Episode 300 is coming out soon. Did you think this was going to happen? I sure as hell did not. I was thought I'd be barely lucky to hit 20 because I'd be begging people to come on my podcast. And now we are recording episode 299. And to help me celebrate with this is I have Nicole Solitar, program advisor and team coach at Strategic Coach. If you're a long-time listener, you remember she was on episode 1 and episode 101 because she's one of the main reasons I started this podcast. So Nicole, thanks for coming here and celebrating episode 2B300.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. 299 in celebration of 300. That's a pretty amazing feat considering the work it took to get to number one. So yeah,
Oh
love
yeah.
the opportunity to be here and celebrate and reflect on what's really come out of this podcast in terms of the just amazing conversations, but I think insight and learnings for everybody that listens, everybody that has been interviewed, and then I know for yourself as well. So excited to dig in and really reflect on 299 episodes or 298 pre today's session. So
Yeah, and I like to point out too that I'm really proud of is I never repeated an episode or did a flashback. They've all been new ones and have one every week since we started in October 2021. Is that the right math? Yeah, I think that's the right math.
yeah, that's all right. Nobody will hold you to it. But it's and in what you're saying, and I know that one of the kind of obstacles to getting started was the fear of not having enough people interested in being on, as guests.
Yeah.
And it's been the reverse. Like there's been so much energy and actually a lineup of people that are wanting to get on and talk to you and talk about their journey and their connection to ADHD and the ways that it's showed up in their life. Where do you think that kind of intense energy to be part of this has come from?
Wow, I didn't expect to be slapped this hard with a good question so soon. I think like when you said, I was worried about people not wanting to be on, but I think that was a big doubt of myself being able to provide value to the listeners or to whoever's being interviewed. And I didn't have that confidence in me to be able to get the information that I was searching for. Because in the long run, I realized well, no, I think it was right from the beginning. I want to learn more about the high achieving, growth mindset driven entrepreneur, but there's nothing out there. So I was going to bring smart people and have great conversations to understand that type of person and type of brain. And what was your question? Is that answering your question or I go off something else?
I love it. This is a podcast on high achieving entrepreneurs with ADHD. Hello. Welcome.
Welcome to the club.
No, the question was just where do you think so much energy came from in people wanting to be a part of these conversations? Did you know that there was such, I guess, a high saturation of people experiencing what it is that you're experiencing in this space?
I didn't think or believe that people would care that I would be trying to find these people and understanding that there's a lot more people like me out there. We're just not talking about it. To me, that's one of the biggest things I really appreciate and learned with this podcast is I thought it'd be a few, not a lot.
Yeah.
And then figuring out or not figuring out, but being told that I'm really good at having these conversations and bringing up relevant information. It was very nice to hear that from, I've had some big names on it. I'm not a big name dropper, but some really people that have been skilled and doing this stuff for a while. At the end, all going, "Hey, man, you're really good at this." It's like, oh, okay, maybe I am on the right track. Yeah. And getting those every pat in the back every once in a while, that builds up the energy. But I think at the same time as since I don't hide anything, it's out there. I say it as it is, and the struggles that I'm going through or have gone through, I'm sharing it openly. I think that really helps release other people's energy and be willing to share their story on the podcast too. I think that generates a lot of energy, and then that goes from me to them, to someone else. And then, you know, I know of 12 people that have told me they started their own podcast because I started mine, and just I was able to do this journey. And I take those as big compliments. At first, old Andre would say, well, you copycats, or you guys think better than me, so you can do it better. But kind of realized, no, I can be an inspiration. And that builds up a lot of energy too. So once you start believing that in yourself.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things too around, I mean, ADHD in general, there can be a little bit of taboo around it. And, I think there is definitely more openness about talking about it and, either self-identifying or, taking it to the next step there. And so I think there's also more people with this awareness, for themselves, which I know is a big part of what you do, right? Helping people in that awareness space. And I think there's even just generally, we are in such a distractible culture, right? Such a distractible society. And so even if you aren't, myself, I mean, there's so many things that I've heard you talk about on this podcast that totally resonates with me, and are strategies that I myself can be thinking about and, integrating in even without a diagnosis, because we all are, I know there's a huge amplification of a lot of those things, right? For yourself versus myself, but there's an applicability, I think, even just in the way that society runs now, right? In our culture, that the applicability has also created a lot more energy around this. It's specific to, but it isn't specific to, if that makes sense.
It's relatable to a lot more people than I expected. So like, society is definitely set to be set up with a lot more distractions. So you don't need the ADHD brain to have this continual distraction, your phone, Facebook, clickbait. So a lot of the strategies I do have for the ADHD brains is still applicable to reducing those types of distractions as well. And the pleasant surprise I got out of all this is I got a couple comments. He goes, I don't have ADHD, but I understand my spouse better, or I understand my boss better. So thank you. Then I got other people going, I don't have ADHD, but I like the business side stuff you bring, or the personal development. So I just never realized, I just thought it'd be that one ideal listener, a high achieving ADHD entrepreneur, and that's it. But the fallout, or not fallout, but the breadth of the relatability is out there. And that was a pleasant surprise. Like you said, the distractibility of the world is definitely relatable, and a lot of the structures that I've created, or the systems I created and shared, it helps everyone. Like everyone has ADHD tendencies,
of course,
being quick start, or if you're in different mental health illness conditions, but it's just not as chronic as the ADHD brain, but it's all relatable. So that's a really good one.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're, 299 in celebration of 300. You mentioned having some, notable guests on the podcast. And so, I think some of the big ones that come to mind are, of course, Dan Sullivan. I mean, I'm a strategic coach, so that's my connection. But
and
Dr.
3 times.
Yes,
3 times he was on.
That's right. Dr. William Dodson, Ari Tuckman, Chip Conley, Kathy Colby. I know Colby.
Right.
That was a big conversation there. Steve Sims, Peter Shankman, your daughter, which is still one of my favorite episodes. So I get a shout out to her. But, of all of the episodes that you've done and all of the guests that you've had in, celebration of 300, really being able to highlight 3 highlights, either moments or episodes or learnings, conversations, just 3 really highlights over the last, 299, that we could maybe chat about and review in celebration of that.
The one for sure I do know is I've always really enjoyed talking to the ADHD entrepreneur who are sharing their story and their journey. I get a lot more out of that, as much as I got a lot out of the other guests, but that one just, I don't know if it hits more closer to home, But when I see and hear and observe people's growth and how they overcame it and they gain that confidence, or even so much going, hey, when you did that, you did, this is actually because you overcame that obstacle and that's all you. You can you hear that, oh my God, that was me. I don't suck as bad anymore. Those ones I really enjoy. And then talking about the mental health, to me, that'd be the second one. It was never on my list when we were first planning this. Like, I'm going to shout out to you because you helped me a lot to bring the podcast to fruition. You actually told me, don't bother me anymore if you're not going to start it. Right. And so I thank you for that. So mental health was never on that list of points to consider on topics for it. And all of a sudden it just evolves into becoming a focal point as well of like, I think since our last conversation on episode 101, I would say from then on, mental health is almost always or somehow referred to in almost every episode, and how important it is to maintain that and take care of it. And that to me was a pleasant surprise because there's a lot of personal growth to come to that realization and making that dedication to do that. And then talking to other people who's having this similar struggles or how they overcame it. And, I even had one, Chuck Inglefield, he approached me to be on the podcast because he wanted to share his story because he knew that would help. Because I shared that with Mark Fujiwara, right? So those are really cool moments when people went, hey, because of that, you did, I want to share my story. And I'm all about that personal growth. It's all awareness. We're all going to screw up. We're all going to make mistakes. We can't get it right all the time, and we never will. No. Right. And so that's number two. Okay. And the third one is, honestly, I've had to turn away more people to be on the podcast than people saying, no, I don't want to be on it. That was a huge thing. And then recently I've had a couple conversations with some authors, and, they're starting to hear about me, and they're starting to listen, and they're starting to say, yeah, I want to be on yours. And so those are, when some well-known people or people are starting to refer you to well-known people that was a pleasant surprise and fun. I think is another highlight. So starting from a bumbling idiot on episode 1 with you, being afraid to hit record on episode 2, to today, it's just like, yeah, it's growth. Like I think Gord Vickman from your office even said your first 30 episodes are going to suck. That's when you find your voice. And I think that's about where episode 30, that's when the mental health started becoming a little more important. And then just let it go where it goes. And then realizing, as long as I'm interested to learn it, that person's on. If I have no interest to learn, they're not on, or the topic's not discussed. Because if I'm not interested, I won't learn, and then my listeners won't learn as well.
Right. I mean, isn't that your own strategy, and structure you've put in place to keep yourself interested and engaged?
It is now.
Yeah.
Right. I fell into the trap. Oh, if I get this person, that person, I look I look good. I look, weasel my way and have boring conversations just so I can have likes in there. I fell into that trap, but in the end, it's like, no, in the end, I need to learn. I have no choice but to learn. That's the only way I do things. Right. You know me long enough. If I'm not learning something, I become not very efficient, and I'm not fun to be around. So as long as I'm learning, then it's good for me, and it'll be a great conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I know that you talk a lot about self-awareness as being part of like the journey to be a, high achieving entrepreneur with ADHD. And I think the self-awareness piece is exactly what you're talking about, because it's a protection of, and this is so much of what you talk about in different ways. It's a protection of you in best self in many different facets, right? So if you are bringing people on for ego, or you're bringing people on, just because, and in fact, you aren't best self, and you aren't creating in best self, and you aren't learning, and you aren't, there's a lot of detriment to that. where knowing I need, what are my success criteria, right? To protect me and best self is then helping you to filter in the right, guests and the right connections that are going to spark great conversation. But I feel like, and maybe I don't want to assume, but is that a strategy, in a lot of other places? Is that self-awareness for strategic boundaries something that you have put in place well beyond the podcast?
Well, yeah, it's part of my ADHD structure model, really. Your the ADHD structure to manage the symptoms, quote unquote symptoms that bothers other people. Environment control is major, is one of the key things to do. And to have environment control, you need to create habits and routines, and then also personal rules, right? And one of my personal rules, like you said, I got caught in the clickbait stuff, and I wasn't authentic. I wasn't showing up authentically, and that bothers me. I'm allergic to it. And just now, since I'm aware that I'm allergic to it, it does become fun, and I become robotic and fake. And now I try to be there, being authentic. And with self-awareness, you need the self-honesty part, right? You can be self-aware but not do shit about it. But but at the same time, it's a lot of self-honesty. It's hard to admit a lot of stuff you're not too impressed about yourself. So being there in the authentic self with that ADHD structure around, it's definitely helping with the boundaries as part of the habits and routines, or the personal rules, sorry, the boundaries, the barriers, very important. And then the other thing too is the non-negotiables. Like the one non-negotiable about the podcast is, if I'm not interested in the topic, I'm not talking about it. I don't like pretending that I do. It makes me feel very fake, manipulative. I'm allergic to that. So I just, sorry, not interested. Have a nice day. So non-negotiables, your barriers and boundaries, very key. And it's not easy. I feel bad turning people away or saying no, but at the same time, it is what it is. And going down the route, like, me and you, we talk about unique ability all the time. If we're not in unique ability, it's not fun. It's extra work. It's mentally taxing. And I'm just sick and tired of the world being not authentic, fake, manipulative, all for looks and appearances, and not real, And now I'm not afraid to share it. And like you said, like having my daughter on, having that real conversation about how much of a shithead I was for those few years, right? What parent has that, right? I didn't make excuses. I explained what happened, but I'm still responsible for being a shithead during that time. But with her, she saw it from my side, and she's understanding of it. So that's the whole point of all this. We need to talk more to have the understanding so we can value each other, not just put people in line. Oh, you're an angry person. I get the right to not deal with you and push away. Well, why are we asking why that person's angry? Maybe it's you. Why can't you say, maybe I upset them? No, we can't do that. You got angry. You're illegal. You can be pushed away.
Okay. So the three for you are the kind of stories and journeys of the ADHD, high achieving entrepreneurs with ADHD, really kind of the mental health conversations that have come out, and then really just that influx of interest. Like you mentioned turning people away, but partially it is also, just that sheer amount of like interest in being a part of what you're creating. So of the, and you don't have to name names or particular stories, but I'm curious on one, because you've talked a lot about learning and how this is all for you about learning. And of all of the ADHD stories and journeys, is there one takeaway, one way that you thought differently, one thing that you really connected to in a particular story? And again, you don't have to, go to that particular story unless you want to, and, shout them out, because I know all the conversations are so impactful. But one, just story or journey that for you really did spark a new learning or a new insight or a new way of thinking about something that you hadn't thought about before.
Wow. You're asking a fact finder to pick one thing that's better than all the others. That's so unfair, but valid, because we can be here for quite a few hours.
I'm sure. Just gut
I
Go with
right
your gut.
now, well, actually the one that really did hit me was post-traumatic growth
Okay.
with Dave Sanderson. I just remember that one well, I can't say that word succinctly.
Okay.
He was one of the survivors when the plane ditched into the Hudson River. He was the
Mhm.
last person off the plane. We were talking actually at a workshop at Coach, and he was saying, I suffer from PTSD. I'm like, the hell is that? And he's like, it's post-traumatic growth. I'm like, oh my God, I know
Wow.
exactly what you're talking about. I want to talk more about, but on the podcast. So it's like PTSD or PTSI, as it's known now,
Mm.
is then you got a very traumatic event, and then you're not well, depressed, you get depressive anxiety things, but because of that one event, and then
Mhm.
you go internal, and then you have a hard time with day-to-day living or life. But the post-traumatic growth is, he was told by his psychiatrist that he flipped it. Instead of going regressing, took it as an opportunity to launch himself and grow, become a speaker, a motivational speaker, and helping a lot of people share their moments. And I just immediately reflected on that, because very rarely do I regress internal. Usually I'll take it as a pivot to challenge and move forward. And just having that different perspective to realize and to share with people is, you can still have a shitstorm of a time that's not fun, traumatic, but we can still move forward and grow from it. But it has to do with mindset and just being able, now that I know with a lot of people that they hear it, it'll be in the back of the mind, they'll forget about it. But when something happens, it might just spark a subconscious thing and say, no, go for it. Go for it. You don't have to go this way. Maybe we can go that way. So that was a really good one. But that's in an interview, but I'll tell you one thing. My short about ADHD and alcoholism,
Mhm.
uh, I had no intention of beginning of that short. Like, I started talking about the alcoholism chat we had with the doctor, and by the end of it, it was like, holy crap, I'm an alcoholic,
Mhm.
right? Coming to that realization, it's like, damn, now it
Mhm.
makes sense. And then I talked to some other alcoholic friends, because once you say something like that, all the other recovering alcoholics come out of the woodworks,
Of
right?
course.
And they're like, oh yeah, man, you were, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I would say that was probably one of my biggest insights. And based on conversations,
Mhm.
which is, it's like, I
Wow.
got a lot of stuff all over. Oh, like a lot of it's all about refinement, little new things to improve, refine, from transformation. Like, I think a lot of us, we've already transformed, and we just need to transcend to the next level of us. So every time you get a little bit of piece, that one thing to refine and just continually build, I'm getting that not almost all episodes, even my shorts. But I'd say those are the two big ones that really stands out. And the most recent one, which is about to come out, is the one about time blindness with Ari Tuckman.
Mhm.
Like, that was an eye opener. I knew a lot about it, but the way he framed it and explained it just really made sense why time is very, I can't see it. I can't feel it.
Yeah.
Therefore, I cause a lot of schedules just don't work because of that. So that was another good one that just definitely, and that way I know how to coach my clients a lot better
Of course.
with that new learning. So,
Okay, so out of 299, you whittled it down to 3. So I'm really proud of you.
well, you asked for three. Did you?
Yeah.
No, you
No,
asked for
I asked
one.
for
You asked for
1.
one.
But that's
Well, I'm
all
gonna put
right.
a fourth one in there. The ones when we talk
Yeah.
about kids and
Yeah.
families,
Let's do
are
it.
very, I've had
Okay.
quite a few of those with
Yeah.
my kids and with other people about kids. Those are I feel those a lot. Those are good.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And again, I mean, I think in a distractible world, a lot of these strategies can help. And I feel like, I mean, we're not going to get into too deep of a
Yeah.
conversation, but there's the overdiagnosis, a misdiagnosis, the not dying, right? There's all of those kind of nuances in the space. And so even if, your child is not,
Yeah.
identified as, they still live in a space that creates the environment that could create more distractibility, or right. So I think it's, again, as I would listen and get strategies as a parent, right, to a 4-year-old son, there's things in listening to parents, and again, even the one with your daughter, that's, there's a lot of learnings to take on, even if it's beyond a self, kind of utilization.
And you know what? I never really realized that till you mentioned it just now. I think if this is what you meant or not, but what I took from it was every episode, you don't have to have ADHD to get a learning or a
Absolutely.
clarity. Because, one of the things is all about self-reflection and self-discovery and understanding yourself a little more so you can start seeing other people as they are and value their differences. So, yeah.
Self-awareness is also realizing others aren't the same as you, right?
Yeah.
That's
And
so
accepting it and valuing it. It's not respecting or accepting, it's to value it. Because once you value it, you know how to interact better with it.
100%. Okay, so mental health, big one. What is, just again, like, I know you mentioned Chuck's episode, which I also loved, because I know Chuck and he's great. But what is, just in that whole, level of conversation that's come out of the podcast, what's been one for you, just kind of insight? I know you talked a lot about seeing that now as a thread through, but anything in the mental health that is like notable, stuck out to you, a story, an insight, a transformation?
So a lot of my research, I kept falling, this point just kept coming back to me in different ways. But in the end, it's amazing. That brain is so amazing. It's the only purpose of the brain is to help you survive and keep you safe. That's it. Nothing else. So the stories we tell ourselves affect us in different ways. So, if you're feeling depressed, the brain will actually start saying, hey, let's go to the party to get back to where you were before. Or if you're doing too much, like, it doesn't know if it's a negative or positive. That's why we get substance abuse illnesses now, because your brain is helping you get away from a pain. Therefore, let's go for alcohol. Let's go for drugs. You're hurting too much with this pain, but we're not dealing with the pain. But the brain doesn't know that. And that just really comes down to mental health. It's there to protect you. So what is the problem? So like Eric Solbakken said, alcoholism is not a drinking problem. It's a thinking problem. And no one's dealing with that. We're just throwing drugs to it, but not working on the thinking problem side. And I'm just tired of people playing an act. Oh, I don't have these issues. I'm never anxious. It's bullshit. Everyone struggles. Maybe it's not chronic like some people, but it goes up and down with everyone. Don't tell me you're never anxious, you're never depressed. It does. And we need to talk to that. And entrepreneurs, I guarantee you, everyone has dealt with major mental health illnesses, didn't talk about it, lost companies, lost lives, affected relationships. And we just got to stop bullshitting ourselves and just talk about it, right? Because even Chuck said when he went on the podcast, other people start talking to him. Same thing with Mark. And people, we just need to talk about it. Why is it taboo? It's been, take care of your mental health first and your physical health will follow, because your brain can now take care of your body because it's not being taxed by the mental health challenge.
100%.
So that's where, and just talk about it. Do I look like an idiot? Do I look like a fool? I don't think so. That's your perception, not mine. If you don't think I am, then that means you're listening. If that's what you think, I'm sorry. Have a nice day. There's the door.
Yeah.
So, but to get to that point, that does take time. But it comes with confidence. And that's the one thing I just wrote down here. That's the one thing that really got to episode 299 is it's helped me appreciate myself and my value to others. And that's why 300, who cares? 500 is my next one. I got lots more to share and to do and to talk about, because because you asked me what the top 3, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at the repeating. I got some guests that were repeating, but I never, maybe the subject was the same, but it was not the same conversation. It was higher level every time, because what I learned from that first conversation, plus my experience in between the time, I had a lot more questions and more information I wanted to get. And that just builds on, builds on. So if I'm bringing repeat guests, it's not to talk about the same thing. It's just to talk at a higher level because I want to learn at a higher level.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that, you know, kind of plays into the last of the kind of top three that you mentioned, which was really just the sheer amount of interest in being a part, you know, of the podcast, or,
Yeah.
you know, some of the things that have come from the podcast. So, in that vein, knowing, you know, a lot of people have been kind of pulled in either as, you know, wanting to be a guest, one of your, you know, loyal listeners that's been there from episode 1, and hello to you.
Yeah.
You know, that really, I think, just amount of interest that you have seen into what you're creating, you know, not necessarily a learning from that, but what really is next, because there's been other outlets now that you've started to think
Yeah.
about or put in place, right? I mean, the YouTube channel, I don't want to answer the question for you, but there's been other things now that have been created or are in creation to support this huge amount of interest in what you're talking about. So maybe less a lesson and more of a what to expect, you know, in
Yeah.
the pursuit of 500. And with this huge insight that you've had with that interest in the podcast and what you're creating, what is there, you know, for people to really expect and be able to engage with?
Yeah. Like the one thing is, people are telling me they're thanking me for telling the true story, the real story, like the shit show part, and they relate to that. And I wanted to tell more. So the thing is, like, I got here about, I don't know how many pieces of paper with a bunch of different notes. These are all ideas for shorts. There's enough here for 5 years, right? But they're all good and relevant to everyone. So with some help, with some guidance, is start doing more on YouTube. And I got our YouTube channel and then more on LinkedIn. So the YouTube channel is more sharing my stories and experiences that's not necessarily podcastable, but it's there. A lot of my learnings, and I want to start bringing on just random people who are just having an interesting conversation, and then just share that, because every time I talk to people, I learn a few things, they learn a few things, and why not have everyone else? So yeah, YouTube's been very big. That's been very well received, actually. Yeah, going strong on that and LinkedIn, and just get the conversation. It's just, we're oddballs in everyone else's eyes. And like one of my clients said in one of our sessions was like, you know what, Andre, we are so effed up, feels normal now.
Yes.
Because of the group that we created. So yeah, it's just to get out there to say, I hear you, I understand you, I see you. Not everyone else does, but that's fine. You just be you. Because there's a bunch of us around.
I love it. And then some other things, I mean, getting to 500, potentially, of course, in the fall. So people have got some cool things to look out for in terms of how you are synthesizing everything that you're learning through this journey and being able to, bring it to, I guess, the masses, if you will, which is just
It's an odd thing to say, but it's true.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'll hold you to it, just like I did the podcast.
Yes.
So, just in celebration of, 300, I know, again, this is 299, but I'm just going to bump us up. So, in celebration, I mean, it has been a huge journey, I think, of learning, for yourself and that growth of confidence. There's been this just massive connection from the audience and from those that want to be on the podcast and a part of the conversation. You've had a lot of interest in people wanting to do work, on some of the things that you're talking about. And,
well, I'm getting a lot of people randomly requesting to be on and I have no connection to. So that was a cool little revelation over the last 8 months.
Yeah. And, I think in the pursuit of 500, which I know you will get to, just being able to really celebrate the space that you have created. And I know you've only highlighted a few, but the space that you've created for taboo to be removed around
Yeah.
ADHD and mental health, and open up, you know, pathways for communication with family and team members, and, you know, just all of the extensions that have come out of what you've been able to create and the conversations that you've been able to have. And, you know, just what a great way to be able to celebrate 300 by reflecting back on some of the big moments and key learnings, and to really get excited about the momentum that brings for the next, you know, 200, when hopefully we're sitting down and celebrating 500 and throwing my name in the hat, you know, to
Oh no,
interview.
you're already scheduled in. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah, but just, you know, I think a massive congratulations to you, and also a great celebration of everybody that's been able to be on the podcast and tell their stories and be open and be vulnerable and
Yeah.
share and educate. And, you know, I know that you are at the heart, but there's been a lot of, people that have spent their time and energy to become, you know, part of that. And yeah, just a great celebration. So I thank you for the work that you do. And of
Thank
course,
you.
those for that have been a part of it. And I can't wait to celebrate, you know, 500 and see what has happened from now to then. So
Well, I thank you for kicking me in the ass at the beginning with the
gladly.
ultimatum, but that's because you know me. That's
Yes.
because you know how to work with me. So I thank you for that. John Workington as well has been a great supporter. And you, the listeners, thank you. And the comments is really good. Now, the one thing I just realized, I think is a big takeaway for me of all this is because I stood up on stage to talk about it, people were starting to show up. Sometimes you just need that one person to talk. And then those people, since I did that, they talked, then they became their own little stage and everyone around them. So that's where the fractal effect is, or the ripples in the pond, right? So if I talk about it, you talk about it, you talk about it, someone else talks about it, and it just spreads that way. So yeah, sometimes you just got to speak out and people will show up. So cool.
Happy
Nicole, thank you
300.
again very much. And we'll see you in episode 499.
I'll hold
Or
you to
maybe
it.
we'll make it a special 500 and not a short.
Awesome.
Thanks again for your support and for being here. And to you, the listener, thanks again for learning with me. And here's to the next 200. Thank you.